My name is Debilynn Fendley, and I am a conceptual artist from Arkansas, working in painting, printmaking, and photography. This is my new solo exhibition called Out of Eden, and it is based on my spiritual thoughts. This is an oil painting. It is done in one of the older traditional methods of making an oil painting, in that the oil is painted over the top of a tempera base. Graphite is something that is very near and dear to my heart. When I first launched my professional career, I thought of myself only as a graphite artist. A lot of the pieces in this show, people will ask me, surely that's not all graphite. Surely there's ink in there. But with the methods that I use a variety of different types of pencils. This one and two or three of the others in the show, you'll see this very dense, dark background, which comes from a pencil that is combining graphite and charcoal and kale and clay to make it very, very dark. And then the teeny tiny little cross-hatching details that you will see are done with actual drafting pencils with a very, very sharp, small, tiny little lead. I have several etchings in the show, along with a couple of other forms of printmaking. I sort of rolled out of bed one morning and discovered that I was known as a printmaker, which was not a huge leap from my graphite drawings. But etchings, as with all original hand-pull prints made on a printing press, they're known as being multiple originals, in that you take one particular base and can print it over and over, and each one of those prints is an original because they'll slightly vary from each piece to another. And the hand of the artist is always visible within them, and that's one of the things that sets them apart from posters at Walmart or giclées that you might walk into a gallery and purchase that were photographed from another original piece of art. Etchings, like any other type of hand-pull original print, start out as an original, unique concept. Etchings are done with a method of engraving through a ground on top of a metal plate and then immersing it in acid baths until each one of the values and gradations comes through. Monoprints are one of the, I think, easiest techniques for printmaking, and it's something that anyone who's interested in art or dabbling in art and you want to get into printmaking can do this, because you don't necessarily have to have a printing press to print these. You can take the back of a wooden spoon and a piece of paper on top of whatever base you're printing from. The ones that I do when I'm doing monoprints, in which there are a myriad of ways to do them, but when I do them, I take my sketch and enlarge it full scale, and then I take a piece of plexiglass and put it over the sketch. And I use the ink that I'm using, which is all oil-based ink, and I go over the top of the plexiglass and paint into it, so that I'm copying what I have on the background, but it's not quite as tight as most of my work is. It's very, very loose. And then I'll take that plexiglass and run it through a printing press, and I'll come out with the monoprint. And it will be a one-of-a-kind piece, because I can't go back and replicate in exact form that particular piece again, because I've hand painted it. Unlike the etchings, which I have a piece of metal that has the drawing engraved into it. These are very, very special pieces in that this is a process that not very many printmakers or photographers handle these days. Photogravure was one of the earliest forms of producing a photograph. I went all the way to San Francisco to produce the 2 photogravures that are in this particular show, because Crown Point Press in San Francisco is one of the only couple of places, 2 or 3 places in the United States where you can actually go in and produce a photogravure. This is not only a photograph, it started out as a photograph, it started out as a photographic negative, but it is also an etching, a hand-pulled original print. And it goes through a very specific process of going from the negative to being etched into copper to being printed on a printing press. Very expensive, very tedious, and these days, very rare. Nowadays, even though I started out in an analog darkroom and still have a darkroom, I have made the transition to digital, as a lot of other photographers have, but I always make sure that my images, when they are printed on archival paper with inks that are archival, meaning they're not going to fade. They're not like the photograph that you would go buy from Walmart, and the paper is not going to turn yellow over the years because it is an acid-free based collector's style paper. With my photography, I like to make it look, if you can think of it as less digital, more analog, more like something you would have done in a dark room. So I will go in and manipulate not the image itself, not what's in the image, but I will manipulate it so that it looks like it came from an old type of process, whether it be Van Dyke or selenium, or in this one, a little bit more like wet colloidal, printed, you know, the negatives made on a sheet of glass rather than on a negative. Lithography by far is one of my favorite types of printmaking, but it's not something I can do at home. Anybody out there listening, any universities, if you do it, invite me to come do a print. I'll be happy to come do a print. The lithography is the most like drawing of any other form of printmaking, and the only one that has true continuous tone. In lithography, traditionally, it's done on large pieces, very thick pieces of limestone, which is drawn on with grease. And then once it's processed correctly, the grease and the water will hold the ink where it's been drawn and repel it from the places where it's not been drawn onto. I love the feel of lithography because drawing on those stones is just the creamiest feeling in the world. It's not like drawing on any other substance known to man. I'm a little bit unusual amongst painters in that I don't really have a preferred method of painting, and I handle about 3 different mediums. I paint in oils, I paint in watercolors, and I paint in acrylics. And it's actually very difficult sometimes, if you look at my pieces, to tell the 3 types of mediums apart, unless you look at what it is painted on. With acrylics and watercolors, I always use a paper to paint on because I love to be able to have something light and manipulative. My acrylics, however, I paint them a lot differently than most people handle paint. If you look at my pieces very, very, very closely, you'll see that my acrylic paintings look in technique a lot like my graphite drawings in that I crosshatch. I'm not really blending anything together. I'm making teeny tiny little brush strokes of color, one layer after another, after another, after another, so that it takes me quite a while to do one of these pieces. And when you get in like really, really close, you can see how delicate those brush strokes are and how tiny they really, really are. Thematically, I have been called various things as far as being an artist. I've been called a photorealist in the past, which is not completely and totally true, because I do change my work from the photographs that I use to base it on. And I've also been called a symbolist, which is a little bit closer to what I do. But the term that fits me the best is conceptual artist. I take abstract concepts and try to present them in a realistic form that is not abstract. It's not taken from nature and abstracted into any different thing. And as such, because I'm dealing with abstract concepts, I'm consistently dealing with themes that are more spiritual in nature. What is grace? What is faith? What is humanity? How do we treat our fellow humans? What is fear? What is anger? What is isolation? And I try to give a visual idea of what each one of those things feels like to me, or feels like to the subject that I'm depicting.